Hello and welcome to the Ask About Wealth podcast. No guest this week, so I want to talk to you about something that's very close to my heart, and that's information. If you think about it, to make any financial decision to your best possible advantage requires information. And while there is a plethora of information out there, the problem often is that the source of the information is bias. And bias is to be avoided at all costs if you're looking to get the best return possible from your financial circumstances. There's an old joke that says two fellas are floating over Ireland, west of Ireland, in a balloon. And they're 60 feet off the ground and they shout down to a man standing in a field and they say, "Where are we?" And your man shouts back, "You're 60 feet off the ground in a hot air balloon." And one in the basket turns to the other and said, "Must be a financial advisor. Completely accurate information and no bloody use." Now, the point here is that information provided by people selling you stuff may well be, as it is for the men in the balloon, no bloody use. I'll tell you a story. And this is a story from my own experience. And around 2000, 2002 type time, we started, in my business at the time, started to get questions about property in Hungary, particularly property in Budapest. This was getting towards the end of the Celtic Tiger. Lots of Irish people were buying property all over the world, never mind all over the country. And Budapest became very important source of property. When we got our first phone call in the practice I was operating at the time, I simply was able to say to people, "Look, I know nothing about Budapest property. You need to find somebody, on the ground who can tell you impartial information." But as the number of phone call inquiries rose, I went to my business partners and said, "Guys, we got to find out about this Budapest bubble that's happening. We've got to find out about Budapest property." So my partners agreed. I bought a plane ticket to Budapest and I racked up at Dublin Airport to be shown onto a wide-bodied Aer Lingus jet. These are generally speaking, the ones that fly across the Atlantic. They have 300 plus seats on them. And that was the demand. Practically every other person on the flight was a couple. And you can nearly see the equity release check hanging out the back pocket. They had been given money by Irish banks to go buy Budapest, in this case, property. So we flew to Budapest. We all get off the plane. Everybody bar me and the crew were met by a very well-presented young lady in a very colourful uniform and led onto a bus of the same colour and driven off, no doubt, to an apartment overlooking the Danube. And here's what they were told in the sales pitch. They were told that this property was only 250 grand. It'd be 700 grand if it was in Dublin. They were told that 700 a month and it'd wash its own face in terms of rental. And they were told that the property in Budapest had risen by 10.4% a year for the previous decade. Not a word of a lie, guys. Everything they were told was true. However, me getting into the Lada taxi, I had booked an appointment with a local accountant. So I arrive at this dusty basement to meet with a chap who spoke pidgin English at best, but enough to give me the information I wanted. The first question I asked him was, how many Hungarian citizens rent property? He surprised me with a statistic. He said 96% of Hungarians own their own property. Now, at the time, the same statistic in Ireland was 76%. And I said, how is this possible? How can 96% of Hungarians own their own home? And he said, well, when we kicked the communists out, we gave the property to the people. So that told me there was no indigenous letting market in the Hungarian population. The second question I asked him was, what's the average income in this city? He told me the average income in the city was €350 per month. He then told me the average income in the country was €150 per month. So not only did the first question tell me there was no indigenous letting market, But the second question told me that even if there was an indigenous letting market, the people couldn't afford $700 a month. The third question I asked him was, why did Budapest property increase in value by 10.4% a year for the last decade? And he told me that was because we were joining the EU, which had happened the previous May. So the catalyst for this 10.4% property growth, being the joining of the EU, was now past. That would not be repeated in the future. The final question I asked him was, who was doing all the renting in Budapest over the last few years? And he told me that there had been literally thousands of EU civil servants in Budapest helping the Hungarian state prepare for EU membership. But they'd all gone home the previous May. So let's go back to the balcony overlooking the Danube with the pink champagne and the girls in the pretty uniforms. These people are being told that it's only 250 grand, 700 grand, or 700 a month, I beg your pardon, and it'll wash its own face. 10.4% a year for the last 10 years. All completely accurate, but like the guys in the balloon, not too much use. If I had crashed that party and told the people that the indigenous letting market didn't exist, that the average income in the city was half the amount they were being told would wash its own face in rent, if I had told them that the 10.4% a year for the last 10 years had been driven by EU membership and that had expired or they had become EU members the previous May, would they have made different decisions? Damn right they would. The point I'm making is that information, when it's given by those selling you stuff, is invariably biased. As I mentioned, there's not a single piece of information that these people were given overlooking the Danube that was inaccurate. They were not being lied to, but they were being given information that didn't help them make the best financial decision possible. Now, I flew back on the same Aer Lingus wide-body jet with those people, and the vast majority of them had bought property. And while I don't know this for a fact, I'm pretty sure, because this was pre-bubble burst of 2008, that the vast majority of them lost money on the deal. And they lost money because they got their information from the wrong source. So let's bring this home. And you've heard me talk about the fact that financial advisors in Ireland, the financial advisory marketplace, is predominantly paid to sell you and me pre-packaged products. Be these pension funds or investment funds, be they bonds or savings policies, or even properties. These are pre-packaged products being delivered by salespeople, being delivered by people who are remunerated not to make you money, but to sell you the product. So, how do you avoid this? You avoid it by separating product delivery from advice. Here at Ask About Wealth, we see our role as giving you, our listeners and viewers, and people who view our various contents on our social media channels, we're here to give you new knowledge and new information. That new knowledge and new information is to help you choose, instruct, challenge, and question financial advisors, recognizing that most of them are paid to sell prepackaged products. Let's examine those prepackaged products for a minute. Those products come to you and I as the end users with the institution that's manufactured them, their profit already enshrined in the terms and conditions. With the fella who's flogging it to you, his or her profit already enshrined in the terms and conditions. Where does that put your and my profit? In that example, no better than third place. So, information is the key, and the source of information dictates how useful that information is or not. Let me interrupt this podcast for a moment. Do you know how to create wealth? Do you know how to limit your taxation? Do you know how to protect that wealth when you do create it? Well, if the answer is no, our masterclass is for you. Over 12 modules and 36 videos, I will personally teach you how to create wealth, how to minimize your taxations, how to protect that wealth when you create it. Check out the link below, and now back to the podcast. I was talking to a consult recently, and we were talking about retirement funds. And I was telling him the benefits of retirement funds from a tax planning point of view in Ireland. And it won't surprise you guys to know that I think retirement funds are by far the sharpest tool in the box. They provide so many excellent tax breaks. But as I was explaining this to the consult, he started to argue with me. And I said, stop. I'm not trying to sell you a pension fund. I really don't care what you do with the knowledge and information I give you. That's up to you. So if you can separate knowledge and information from product delivery, go back to my Budapest story, you will decide not to buy the property rather than to buy it because you've got unbiased, impartial advice. And the only way to guarantee yourselves impartial advice is to deal with people who don't sell the product. If I'm paid, let's put it this way, guys. You know, if you want to know who somebody works for, follow the money. So if you want to know who I work for, find out where I get paid, who pays me. If you want to know who your financial advisor works for, find out who pays him or her. They're the people. This idea that financial advisors can get paid for flogging us stuff and purport to represent you and me is an anathema. It's an oxymoron. It cannot exist. You can't serve two masters. You're either paid to sell a product or you're paid by a client to help them make the best decisions possible. They are fundamentally different offerings. We don't call the fellow who sells us a Volkswagen an automotive advisor. We call him a car salesman, paid by VW to sell us a product made by VW. Now, in the automotive advisor space, it's easy to see their salesman because VW is over the door of the garage you walk into. VW is on the business card. VW is on the lease agreement you sign. So it's very obvious that we're being sold a product there, not being advised. But when somebody hands you a business card that says independent financial advisor on it, it's less obvious, isn't it? Now, recognize, guys, that under Irish rules and regulations, an independent financial advisor is defined as someone licensed to sell regulated financial product. An independent advisor in Ireland is defined in our laws as a salesperson. In the future, to make the best financial decisions possible, to accumulate the most wealth your circumstances will allow, to achieve the elusive goal of financial freedom, and even to pass that goal on to the next generation or the generation after that. That requires impartial information. I can assure you that the Ireland's wealthy don't take advice from people paid to make other people money, and neither should you. The best way to achieve the outcomes you want, the best way to get the very best returns your circumstances will allow, is to engage with impartial advisors. Now, impartial advisors aren't easy to find. They're almost like hen's teeth in this country because they all look the same. But there are impartial advisors out there. And how do you know they're impartial? They charge you a fee. Follow the money. Who do they work for? If they're charging you a fee, they work for you. Their job isn't to sell you product. Their job is to help you buy the products best suited to your circumstances and your objectives. Now, I have no problem with salespeople. I've no problem with salespeople in the car industry or in the clothing industry or in any other industry for that matter, because they don't pretend to be anything else. I have problem with salespeople who pretend to be advisors, who say to you, my job is to make you money, when they actually get paid to sell you pre-packaged products. Impartial financial advice is available. Is it expensive? Well, it's more expensive than the free advice you get. That's for sure. But free advice isn't free. Let's face it, if you're not paying for your financial advice, then either you're getting it from a charitable institution or somebody else is paying. And if somebody else is paying, it's their tune. There's an old saying in the world, and it's just as applicable to the financial world as it is anywhere else. He who pays the piper calls the tune. You know this to be true. You also know the other one. There's no such thing as a free lunch. You know this to be true. But there's lots of free financial advice. Is it advice? No. It's product selling, tied up in a nice bow and presented as advice. Eventually, I hope that Ask About Wealth and other efforts that we'll make will change this circumstance. You've probably heard me say before that an IFA, an independent financial advisor, for example, on the bigger island across the way from us, is genuinely an independent financial advisor. Under British rules, IFAs cannot sell product, cannot take commission from product sales, must work for the customer. And I urge our legislators to catch up and make the same rules here. But until they do, only you and your due diligence can make sure that you separate so-called financial advice or product selling from impartial financial guidance, which is only available from impartial advisors who don't sell you stuff.